Welcome to another episode of Breaking into Cybersecurity, where we talk to the individuals who are breaking into the industry and found out what they did, what they do to keep up, and how they can help the next generation. Today, we have Hanah-Marie, who will be sharing her story of breaking into cyber. Hannah, how about you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
So my name is Hanah-Marie Darley. I'm the Chief AI Officer and one of the co-founders at Geordie AI. We are an agent, security, and governance platform for Agentic AI. But my background is quite widespread. So I started in government intelligence, did that for about 10 years. And then I was in cybersecurity. So I was in specifically kind of the intersection between AI and cybersecurity at a company called Darktrace. I was one of their primary AI and cybersecurity experts, built out their threat research program, and also spent a lot of time with customers, helping them to get the most from their AI. And all of that feeds into my role now at Geordie. So thanks so much for having me.
Seems like everything's going the agentic way these days. What got you into technology? And let's kind of take your career journey step by step from there.
Yeah, I think what gets me really excited about technology is problem solving. Like most of what technology gives us is the ability to solve more and more interesting problems and in easier ways, or ideally in ways that are less stressful. And so I think one of the biggest passion projects for me in any role that I've ever been in has always been that really core aspect of problem solving. How can I get my hands around something? How can I provide a solution? How can I find a pathway that makes it better? And I just think that's what's exciting about a lot of technology, and of course AI, but not just AI.
So, what was your first entry into it? Tell us about your early career and what got you into technology to begin with.
Yeah, so my early career was in government. So the technology was not as sexy as it could be in the private sector. I would say what got me really excited was the analysis and the data itself. I used to do a lot of structured analytic techniques and hypothesis testing, and all of that was enabled by technology, but it was just a really exciting time for thinking really aggressively about how to underpin your own assumptions and also how to turn them on their head and question them. And so some of that was supported by data gathering. So how can I get really good evidence together? You know, it's not easy to gather systems data. It's not easy to maintain good data. So some of that was kind of the technical side of data. And then some of it was running statistics. Some of it was running structured hypothesis testing. There was a lot of really exciting analytical moments and a lot of red string mentally, but I think that was probably my entry point. And then the technology got much better after government. So when I got into the kind of proper cybersecurity industry, I was at a really innovative company that was really focused on how AI can improve cybersecurity. So really thinking about lots of different algorithms and techniques to help defenders not only stay ahead of threats, but also anticipate unusual activity. And that was a really exciting time for me as well.
Coming out of a government career where they've spent a lot of time, say, doing analytics, but not doing technology and pivoting into technology can be a hard jump. So, what were some of the skills and capabilities that allowed you to do so that would help our audience to do a similar jump for themselves?
I think the first thing is, and I think most people say this in job interviews, but it's curiosity. It's being willing to learn by yourself. I think one of the hardest things for most people is that you kind of want someone to just tell you what to go learn, what to go look at. You know, I get questions all the time about, you know, which AI courses should I take, or how should I think about this, or which resources. And the truth is, honestly, it works differently for everybody. The thing that makes total sense to me will absolutely not excite you and won't make any sense to you. So some of it is understanding how you learn. But I think there's a huge piece of it that is not being satisfied with not knowing. I think you can train yourself into that as well. Thinking through, how can I broaden my understanding here? How can I sit in the room with people who know much more than I do and who are much cleverer than I am? And how can I extract their wisdom? I always think there's a quote, and I can't remember who it's by, but it essentially says, if you're the smartest person in the room, find a new room. And I think that is essentially how you make that transition. You know, if you, especially if you have a lot of experience in one area, I think taking the lessons from that experience. So in my case, it would have been questioning assumptions. So not being able to just assume that a system is working because it says it's working, but why is it working? Or if that system weren't around in 2 years, how would we reconnect our technology systems? How would we pivot our security programs? And I think it makes it easier for you to start thinking about those transition points. Another thing that was really helpful for me was having a super evidence-based core. Everything that I did had to be data-driven. I had to be able to prove without a shadow of a doubt that I knew what I was talking about. And I think that really lent itself to cybersecurity, because so often cybersecurity can become kind of a vibe sport where you just feel like something is a problem or you're not exactly sure what's wrong. Going back to the data every single time, it was how I built out the threat research function. And it's also a key part of how I would strategize about if I'm not sure what to do next, go back to the data and see what the data tells you. But I think just going back to that curiosity point is the biggest one. Just stay hungry to learn and ask a lot of questions.
I think a lot of folks are challenged with the amount of data, the vastness of the field, and then deciding on where they should be going, what they should be focusing on. And then for you to say, well, go back to the data. And you're like, well, what data point? In an incident, there could be hundreds of millions of data points, and going back to the data could mean any level of things. In your first role out of the government doing threat research, what were some of the ways that you learned to find that data and to find what was meaningful and what wasn't meaningful?
Yeah, I think the first one is to remember that you eat an elephant one bite at a time. So essentially start somewhere. One of the most important things is correlation versus causation, especially in an incident. There could be so many other things happening across your systems at the same time. And so just having a piece of evidence doesn't automatically mean that it's connected to the incident, which of course is what you're talking about, where there's a lot of data and you could be looking at any number of things, but you just have to work your way through it. You just have to go tangle by tangle through each knot that you find and decide whether or not you think it's relevant, which evidence you have to support that relevance, and then continue to match it up as you build your case. So I might start in one log around one specific set of behaviors, but then I might go to a file piece of information or an artifact, and it has no relevance at all to that log. And so I start to question each piece of data. And I think that's what makes security analysis such an exciting thing that people want to do, is it really makes you engage your brain. It really makes you think critically about each piece of evidence that you're encountering. But also my background is in psychology, so I can't help but think about it from how we evaluate information and how we take in information. Very easy to lean on your assumptions. It's very easy to take the first piece of information and sort of anchor to it, and then everything else has to support that. So as I've said since the beginning, every single time you have to question your assumptions. You have to be an interrogator of the data. You can't get too comfortable with it. As much as we need it, we also have to be critical of it. And so I think it's moving methodically through until you have a case that is supported not just by your gut, but also by evidence. And that has really been what I did in threat research, and also what I would continue to do in any problem solving arena.
I love that you keep highlighting some of the non-technical backgrounds that you come from: psychology, data analysis versus any computer science, and how important they are to your career versus someone that, say, had a computer science degree. And oftentimes we feel in this industry that, oh, you have to have a computer science degree to be successful, and you're just demonstrating that you don't. What are some of the ways that you learned to grow and to become the SME that you are?
I intentionally didn't hire candidates who had cybersecurity degrees or who had masters in cybersecurity, because I was really worried about how my team would solve problems and cultural homogeneity. So if you have too many people who think too much alike, they stop questioning each other. And so eventually, one of the things that cybersecurity is great at is people start to really understand how things work under the hood. But the thing it also teaches you in most degree programs is a very linear problem solving mechanism. You go from thing one to thing two to thing three, like the Lockheed Martin kill chain. You just always go back to, but what about reconnaissance? But what? And so you tend to get stuck in that kind of mathematical trap. Whereas if you have a different way of problem solving, if you have circular arguments, if you think about things from an argumentative case. I have to be able to articulate exactly why. There are so many better ways that as a unit you can solve that problem rather than just having one way of thinking. So a lot of it was learning and listening and again, asking lots of questions. I think you never should put a ceiling on how technical you can become based on how technical you are now. And I think that so many times we sort of start from this box where we can say, well, I don't have a PhD in informatics, or I don't have a full understanding of how the original Windows disk was comprised. And so therefore, I will never be able to understand X, Y, or Z about cybersecurity. And it's a total fallacy. You can totally understand and pick up things, but you have to learn it in a way that makes sense to you. And you also have to apply it. I'm really big on applied knowledge because I think just facts for the sake of facts tend to fade to the back of your brain. So how are you going to use that? How are you going to engage that muscle and put it into practice? And I think some of that is teaching. So you see someone do something or you learn something, you then do it for yourself and then you teach it to someone else. And that for me has always been the most effective method of how can I start to communicate something? First of all, I have to understand it. Then it has to make sense to me in a way that I can communicate it back. And then I need to be able to teach someone else that same fact or that same theory in a way that will make sense to them. So I have to be able to answer follow-up questions. And so to me, that's a really great inquisitive way to work your way through new information, taking it upon yourself to learn something without someone, again, directing you exactly where you need to start. And so a lot of it was I got a thread of information from someone and I would follow the thread. So I'd say, I've understood what malware is, and I've understood what a worm is, and I've understood what a virus is. But how do I think about that in the total scheme of all of the software that operates within an enterprise security system? And so I'd work my way through it in that way, rather than just saying, okay, I can now successfully define malware. And so, it is expanding your horizons, but it's also not being satisfied with a first answer or a quick, post-it note of this is exactly what it means.
So one of the things when I looked at your profile was how quickly you grew in your role at your last job. You went from threat analyst to growing your own program to presenting to the community to founding your own company. What's in the drive? What's your secret sauce?
I think some of it was I was mid-career when I made a change, which is very different from a lot of people. So a lot of people that I know will come into cybersecurity as an entry point, and they'll come from uni or they'll come from an earlier job, but it won't be necessarily the case that they've built up a full career. Where I was leading multiple divisions in government. I had a lot of teams. I was used to running programs. So I came into cybersecurity intentionally knowing that I would start as a team member, but I didn't intend to stay as a team member. I had more to give than that. And I guess that's kind of the underlying motivation was I think I could do more with that. I think I could do more here than just this. And that's always been an important thing for me because again, I love to solve problems. So you get into a job and you see within 3 months, you're like, this is a big gap. I could solve it. Or like, I think I have an idea that could change this outcome or I could improve this. It's one of the things that I had to learn about coming out of bureaucracy was that you have the freedom to immediately input an impact and change something without having to get it through a stakeholder committee. That was one of the biggest shifts, was kind of a liberation moment to say, actually, you can build a program. And if the program works, we'll implement the program. And then it will benefit customers, it will benefit the community. And you're using all of your relevant experience. So some of it is just kind of the benefits of a meritocracy where you get good ideas and you let them flourish. Some of it was definitely feeling like I had more to give, more to offer. And some of it is just absolutely down to individual personality, wanting to make an impact. I'm a very impact driven person. I really like to feel like I'm making a difference where I am. And that was really important to me. And so that's how I achieved it, was by consistently kind of asking and bugging people to try something or to give an idea or to, and so the idea of not contributing your idea or you're not giving your perspective, I think that's such a waste of an opportunity every time. Like there's so many people with so many brilliant ideas and you just have to give your perspective. And it doesn't have to look like me. You don't have to be a chatty Cathy who's talking in a meeting, but it might look like a really well thought out and structured proposal that you send via email. If you want to think about it from open sourcing a piece of software. There's so many different ways that you can do it. But I think just get your idea out of you, get it out of your head and get it into discussion. And then if you get a lot of pushback, if you get a lot of no's, it helps you sharpen your idea. It helps you improve how you handle objections. That helps your idea improve itself because it's more resilient because you've tested it rather than just saying, I know this is a good idea because I know it. So,
I love that determination and that flow. And do you think that the evolution of technology within the past couple of years has also helped aid with just the speed of go to market of ideas lately, where you could take something from an idea state to reality in a couple weeks or now even a couple days with vibe coding and show, hey, this really is possible. I created a small version of it, but we could create an enterprise version of it if we wanted to.
100%. I think it really gives you a quick turnaround of this had legs. This could really work. I think the thing it doesn't do is make your ideas better. And the reason that I say that is because you have to worry about monoculture when you talk about any sort of generative AI. It's very easy for your ideas to be enmeshed in all of the ideas that came before you. And of course, there's nothing new under the sun, but there is something about the creative spark and the way that you would solve a problem that's different than if you feed something into a system that has solved a lot of problems before across a number of different authors. So I think there are trade offs, but I think especially with agents, you're seeing how quickly, if you do have a really good idea and you want to construct that idea, you can create such a wonderful construction that other people can visualize and understand how it would make an impact beyond just a presentation or beyond just kind of a paper. So that part absolutely has come leaps and bounds and will only continue to do so with the advancement. But I think there's still so much core space for individual critical thinking and for individual contributions within that flourishing technology ecosystem.
I think going back to a point that you said earlier, it's getting to a point where now having that clarity of this is your idea, this is the context, these are the outputs, these are the expectations, the negatives, the positives. This is what a fully formed idea looks like versus I want you to do this generic thing. Having this fully formed idea is something that's specced out that has business context in it is something totally different than people are used to. I mean, you're writing at least a page worth of a prompt to an agent to form this type of context. And most people don't think of prompting like that just yet. But it does have to get to that level to really feed it the information that it needs to deliver an output that you need like that, right?
Some of it could also be in systems design. So going from the individual prompt into the system prompt, so the guardrails, the little employee manual that digital employee is given to operate. And some of it can also be in the form of other add-ons. So Claude has been really good with integrating hooks and skills. I think you think about the whole autonomous system design. You think, okay, I need to create probably a series of agents to execute a really complex task. And then my agent army has to be able to not only share information, but also have delineated responsibilities. And some of that's really simple because you can now have agents create that for you. So you don't have to do all of the architecture by yourself. But you're right, you have to feed it correct context. You have to give it good ideas and also ideas of what you don't want. So it's not just, I want it to look like X, it's, I don't want it to look like Y and never do Z. So always thinking about the full spectrum of instruction. And I think it very much puts us back into the roots of how do we teach? Do we just immediately give a very small snippet of instruction, or do we give a whole understanding of the problem? Do we give a whole understanding of how we think a solution would look? And so I do think it also pushes you out of simplistic problem solving into complex problem solving.
Now, as we kind of look into the future, what are some of your problems that you're working on yourself?
Gosh, I am dedicating my life at this point to helping businesses adopt AI agents successfully, but also safely. That is what the ethos of our company is. That's what I'm really focused on. Because I do think that agents are going to change the way that not only technology works in the next couple of years, but also the way that businesses function, the way that we can get productivity out. It's not just making us more productive, it's changing the engine of production altogether. And it's very much inspired by the agentic revolution, pulling from the industrial revolution, but essentially, bringing forward a complete step change in how labor and innovation work. And so that's what I'm really passionate about right now. I know that most businesses are using AI agents or adopting them, and that's a huge passion project for me because in my past, I've seen a lot of companies try to get the most out of AI, but because they weren't clear on which problem they were solving and they weren't clear on which application of AI would best serve that problem, there was this huge kind of trust gap between expectations and results and how they were going to get the most out of their investment. I think the agentic revolution has all of the possibilities and makings of the industrial revolution, but I want to mitigate suffering along the way. I want to help people to really adopt agents well and to get the most out of it so that they can see that flourishing of productivity and change in labor. That's really exciting for me. That's definitely what I'm focused on. I think the other thing that I'm really, really passionate about is that we need to bring people on the journey with us. It's not good enough that 10 people in a room who are all super clever understand AI agents really well and can talk about it amongst themselves. We need everybody to understand it. And it's one of the things that I think we learned a lot from the large language explosion was, gosh, people really don't understand the constraints of these systems, or they really don't understand exactly how these systems are comprised or how they're made. These systems are using spatial reasoning between words, but it seems like reasoning because it comes back with human-like text. And so we ascribe it and kind of anthropomorphize it with all these other characteristics that therefore it can make good judgments, or therefore it can change the way that we problem solve. And it can, but you have to have the right understanding. So a big passion project of mine is bringing people along the journey, helping people to understand what AI systems can do and what they can't do, and how to get the most out of them in that messy middle.
So now taking that framing, how do individuals interested in cybersecurity take that and help put that at the foundation of their career so that they could be successful?
I think the first thing is don't decide for yourself that it's too late to get into cybersecurity. I've had this conversation with innumerable people who are mid-career and they're doing okay, but they would love to start coding, or they want to instead see about some of the red team testing and they want to get into some of the really interesting threat side of cybersecurity. And there's just so many spectrums within cyber and kind of terrariums of interesting environments that you could dig into. Don't fall into the sunken cost fallacy and decide that you're too far down your other career to move. You absolutely can do. And there's never been a better time from an education perspective to do so now, where you don't have to get a degree program through you to get that benefit. You can just build skills and then apply for a role or start an internship or just build something on your own. And the other thing that I would say is don't think of cyber as one dimensional. As I said, there's so many different ways to get into cybersecurity, and it might not all look like you becoming a pen tester. It might look like you going into a company where you start working on product design and how to translate customer requirements. And by doing that, you end up solving a huge amount of cybersecurity challenges for real people. So don't limit yourself to just one expression of cybersecurity either.
In regards to the use of AI and the use of agents, how do they do that and still not lose their ability to think critically and problem solve like maybe we did when we didn't have these tools that were so easily at our disposal?
I think the first thing you can do is at the end or conclusion of whatever you receive from either a large language model or from your AI agents work backward on your own and question it. Go and make sure that you have real evidence that supports that outcome, or that means that that's the best solution you could get. Because even if you have to iterate with your agent, making sure that you have the right outcome is still so important. Well, it's done now, so I don't have to think about it. The best systems are collaborative. They're designed to augment human work, not to replace it entirely. And so what you want to do is then you get this amazing output, but then you go back through and you evidence check all of it. And if it's true, then great, you can move on to the next thing. But by doing that, you keep your critical your critical skills, your critical thinking really sharp. And you can still do that on your own, which means that not only do you have this wonderful, lovely output that took a lot less time, but you can also evidence test it and you can hold up to scrutiny when you decide to present it to someone and say, this is a really great idea. You want to make sure that you understand what happened. And also, again, everything is iterative problem solving. There is always a better way to do something. We're never going to reach kind of a glass ceiling of we've perfected all effort, and so now we can stop. I think that there will always be progress forward. So there's always a better way to do something. Try and find it, and then improve your agent with that better way. And then the next time, it's even easier to trace back through their work. So I think a lot of it is still having confidence in your own ability to interrogate information and to come to your own conclusions, and to know that your problem solving is still valuable. You might just outsource some of it some of the time to an agent.
Any special links or resources that you would share with the audience for them to check out that you've found extremely helpful?
Gosh, there are so many resources that I found really helpful. I'm a kind of a nerd, so I like to read a lot of research papers and like academic articles. That really excites me. I'm sure that that will not be the case for everyone. So uh, some of it is unique to me in my background in psychology. I think in terms of like practical resources, if you're like, I want to get my hands around something from an AI perspective, both Stanford and MIT have open sourced a lot of their courses. And so even if you just take a very small snippet of one, maybe you don't dedicate your whole life to it, you'll probably get something from it and then understand more what you want to know. Continuing to seek out resources like this podcast or like podcasts that you can take in additional information and then find other questions to ask. Because I do think the idea of one great resource to rule them all, like there's this amazing place on the internet where all knowledge will be explained. I think, unfortunately, it's not really true. I think everybody learns slightly differently. But for me, it's academic papers, it's research papers, it's looking at what's happening in academia, and comparing it to what's happening in the market. And then I like to go, what's the gap? But for most people, that's not exciting. And so you might want to find that a resource that's more like a course or more like a YouTube or a podcast. But I would say in general, try to just get happening in research, because at least then it's some sort of a foundation of understanding, and they tend to over explain, where a lot of, vendor publications or things that are on the internet, they won't necessarily explain how they got.
Makes sense.
Unfortunately, the meaning of life can't be dissolved down to 42, but we will keep working.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today, and best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lost my mouse.